If you weren't here last week, we started a new 3-week or 3-part series on what a godly man does to love the Lord with his heart, soul, mind, and strength. Last week, Dr. Jason talked about what it's like to love God with our strength, our might. What does it look like to tend to our physical bodies? Okay, so I know I did bring cookies this week. I didn't bring them last week. That was kind of intentional. But I also intentionally put the physical body first, because how often do you guys hear talks or sermons about our physical bodies? No, it's usually neglected in Christian circles. But everything you do in life happens in your physical body. Even the things you are not able to do happen in your body or are limited by your body as well. So taking care of your body is a great, worthwhile venture to figure out, to think about. We talked about all kinds of things last week. I would encourage you guys to go back and listen to it if you weren't here. But I also want to say, thanks be to God that he invites us to love him with our whole being, right? It's not like, I have to neglect my body and that's how I get enlightened. It's your whole self can be devoted to God. Christianity is not a faith that says, soul is good, body bad. Okay? That is like Gnosticism. That is several Eastern religions. Soul good, body bad. Or ancient Greek religions as well. It's not a thing where you suppress one part so that other parts thrive. It's not. All parts are meant to be fully devoted to God. But this does make issues of sin or growth in the Christian life, relationships, faithfulness, and so forth, have several dimensions to them. It's not just a one piece of the puzzle is the answer to everything. There's a lot going on. All the aspects of yourself, all your faculties interact with each other, which is why it's good that God asks us to love him with our whole selves, even though our whole selves are not going to be made whole until we enter eternity. So it's also a great thing with the Christian faith that we don't have to leave our brains at the door when we walk into something like this, or we walk into a Sunday service, or we walk into our normal routine of reading the scriptures. We don't check our brains out and check our hearts in only, right? We walk in knowing that we have the scriptures, we consider the existence, we consider the nature of God with our minds, but we also have to put this together with our fallen nature, right? Our fallen nature has not just affected our souls or our physical bodies, it's also affected our minds as well. Like, I'm not saying that we're not creative, and I'm not saying, you can follow great lines of reasoning and logic. I've listened to incredibly brilliant people who are not believers of Jesus, okay? That doesn't mean they don't have gifts or anything like that. They're quite intelligent, okay? But what I am saying is that it will take a work of God to start drawing a person to the Father and then eventually turn that person to learn to love God with all their minds. And I think even when you turn to trust Christ in faith, there's still some of this residual hostility. I don't want to yield my mind or my heart or anything to God. So all of these pieces come together to remind us of, I think this is one of the reasons why Paul talks about transforming our minds in Romans 12. So if you guys will open up to Romans 12, some of you probably already have this verse memorized. Romans 12, right at the beginning there, verses 1 and 2. Okay, Romans 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, I exhort you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, which is your reasonable service or your reasonable worship. Do not be conformed to the present world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may test and approve what the will of God is, that which is good and well-pleasing and perfect. So since our minds are also affected by the fall that we talked about several weeks ago in Genesis 3, it's right and appropriate for Paul to say, renew your mind. God needs to renew your mind. Now, if that relied on just us, to help each other, we would be trying to renew something that is a broken thing within ourselves. It takes something outside of the broken system to speak into it. You need revelation from God to say, this is true, this is right, this is what you need, this is how to have a relationship with me. All these things that we see in the scripture. You find revelation from God there. You can also find revelation from God in the natural world because he's created that. There's two different kinds. You'd call that general revelation, okay? Thinking about the stars, thinking about life, thinking about how nature works, and special revelation, okay? Like the scriptures. So I find it interesting that a primary thing that is going to fill up and that's going to lead this renovation is God. We develop over time Godward thinking, and he's going to do a work in us to show us his great love, his great kindness, his great character, and put it on display so that we might respond with real love, right? If I was only responding with just feeling, and I didn't actually have a content of who am I loving, who am I thinking about, who am I worshiping, then there would be a divide there. There would be perhaps something you would not call real love because it is not fully engaging your whole self. We continue to seek after him in the power of the Spirit, and it's a relationship that will grow up to and through the time that we step into eternity, which is another great thing about God. You're not going to exhaust your knowledge of him now, nor for the rest of eternity. You're going to have millennia upon millennia upon millennia to continue to know the greatness of God, which is, I'm enticed by that opportunity. So I could continue to learn. I could continue to understand and experience who God is forever. And I get a taste of it now and continue. Well, that's something I'm interested in instead of, all right, cool. After 10 years, I got this thing down pat, ready to go. Move on to the next thing. Wouldn't you want to? I already figured all this out. That's not going to be happening in the Christian life here or in eternity. So I think the more you get to know God, you're going to see him as more glorious, and then you're going to want to be more apt to want to serve, love, worship, obey. And then it continues this cycle. Wow, you're like this? Oh, well, I'm gladly sacrifice. I'll gladly do these things you call me to do. And then I get to continue to know more about him, and it continues to this great cycle. So I want to come back to another great thing about the Christian faith, about being called to love God with all our minds. So this is not a faith versus thinking and reasoning. Okay, they're not like you can have one or the other. That's not what I'm getting at. I had people ask me when I was in seminary and I was studying like original languages and the history of the Bible, how we got it, all this kind of stuff. And people would ask me, hey, now that you're learning more, do you find your faith to be weaker or less substantial or less relevant or one of these types of things? That would be the label. That would be the question. What does that question tell me? It tells me that they think the smarter you are, the less likely you are to be a person of faith or who has religious affiliations or whatnot. It could be about anything, not just the scriptures. And it seems to suggest that faith and reasoning and thinking are opposites, that never the two shall meet. Okay, and you might think about, keep those fairy tales about a grandpa in the skies to yourself. Don't come out into the public square and bring that stuff with you, which is what you get a lot now today. You also get in what is proclaimed of people trying to prevent you to come out into the public square with your thinking, with your reasoning, with your faith position, that you get various levels of essentially like name calling. That's really all it is. It's just, oh, you're an idiot because you believe something like the Bible. That you're just being called a name. That's not really any substantial argument or whatever. Or arrogance or false dichotomies. You can't have your Bible with you. You only can have the scientific enterprise with you. That's the only thing that is valid around here. Those are false dichotomies. And it causes you to say, oh, behind that is this idea that faith is just a non-cognitive, it's a non-thinking thing. It's only relegated to your personal opinions, your personal beliefs, your personal reservations about things. And if that's the case, well, then everybody's opinion is equal, if it's just an opinion thing. You might hear this in popular books or in speakers, that faith is unwarranted belief, or that faith is blind trust, or that faith is belief without evidence, or that you just need to muster up enough faith in order to overcome your serious doubts. As if it's like a force that will help you get over something. I think that's a poor definition of faith. And I would call that a non-Christian definition of faith. To say, just blindly do this. We don't do that with anything else in life, right? I don't just blindly give money to somebody to invest for me. No, I'm going to check on what you're doing, how you're doing, what's your record like. Faith is not merely an emotion. It's not a completely abstract or nebulous thing. I think a good definition of faith is trusting in that thing which you have good reason to believe is true. That you have good reason to believe it's true. Why would I trust something that, it might be true, it might be not, I don't know. I would not want to do that with other things that are less important, let alone things of eternity, right? I want to consider what this is. Is it true or not? I think you'll also find that faith is going to set you on a quest to seek after more knowledge and understanding of God. Because it's not just understanding for the sake of understanding. It's understanding for the sake of knowing and loving God and enjoying Him. In your journey of faith, you may have times where you have to trust God with very little to go on. I would not call that blind faith. I would call that unreserved trust. I have no need to give reservations about pursuing something and going forward on something that God has clearly given me in the scriptures or that He's leading me to in my life. Okay? That's unreserved, not blind. I want to encourage you guys to write this phrase down. It's called, the phrase is faith seeking understanding. It's a fairly old phrase, old as in hundreds of years old. And I encourage you guys to write it down and look up two names that are associated with it. Two names, one of them you might recognize, Augustine, St. Augustine, okay, many hundreds of years ago, and Anselm, Anselm. Okay, they're great theologians, philosophers of their days, and they have a great putting these things together, that I have a walk of faith. I also want to grow in my understanding of this faith that I've put my trust in. So I encourage you guys, take some time to get an accurate view of what they're describing with that phrase. To me, it's a phrase I come back to. It's something on my little notes that I like to have off to the side as I think about my faith, as I think about how I read the scriptures and so forth. Okay? Faith-seeking understanding. One last note before we talk about the how we love God with our mind. I think the Christian faith has actual things that we can know. So, does Jesus only sit up in heaven telling you, just trust me, I've got this thing covered? He has come to earth. He's done miracles in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. He has risen from the dead, showed himself risen from the dead to hundreds of people. He has done things in history, right? We also talked about history of the Old Testament as well. He's done things in history to say, here, test me. I'm showing these miracles. Other people have seen it. You can ask them, right? It's something that there's substance to this. It's not just feelings and opinions about certain moral matters or moral issues. There's claims. They can be tested. It's not just a collection of random things that we happen to hodgepodge together. Your Christian affection that you feel and that you experience and that you do when you're worshiping and singing or when you're in prayer or any other spiritual discipline, all of this Christian affection is inextricably linked to biblical truth. Knowledge, actual things. It's not just I'm going to grab this hodgepodge of a little bit of New Age, a little bit of Eastern meditation. I'm going to grab all these things and make my experience. No, it's inextricably linked to biblical truth. So I think you're going to have a problem if you start to separate, or maybe more strongly, divorce knowledge of God from your experience of worshiping him. Okay? So I know that's kind of maybe some of you have heard those phrases or used those phrases or whatnot. I hope that's an encouragement for you. There's plenty to think about. There's plenty to engage with my mind, engage with my heart, engage with my physical body. The other pieces we'll talk about next week. So getting into how we love God with all our minds. So there are plenty of ways we could talk about this. I just want to bring up 3 categories. The first category is knowing and loving the truth. Knowing and loving the truth. So if you have not believed in something that's true, then you're deceived, right? If what you've believed in is not true, then you're deceived. If you share that with others, you're deceiving them too. Maybe unknowingly, okay? You can read, I'm not going to read this passage, but you'll find this in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul will say, if Jesus has not risen from the dead, your faith is useless. You don't have forgiveness of sins if he has not risen from the dead. And then we're deceiving others too. He'll say those in plain words. But that's also an event. That's a knowledge piece of rising from the dead. Is something that has happened. If it's not actually happened, we have a serious problem. We should go home. Right? It's not just a personal opinion thought about if this has not happened, this is one of the foundational pieces of our faith, we got a major problem. However, if we have put trust in something that's true, and that we've got good reason to do so, we can rejoice. And we can continue on with further discovery and relationship with God. So I want you guys to open up a couple of passages. We're going to jump around a little bit, a couple in the New Testament, a couple in the Old. The first one is John 17:17. Okay, so just to the left of where you were at in Romans, John 17:17. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Set them apart in the truth. Your word is truth. Your word is truth. As a little side note, this is the little Bible verse where I'm trying to get my 2-year-old son to memorize. It's going okay. But your word is truth. It's reliable. Okay? Jump with me over to 1 Corinthians 3:16. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I misread that. 13:16. Sorry about that. Yeah, I know. Jeez. Who is this guy? Okay. It is not glad about love itself. Love is not glad about injustice, but love rejoices with the truth. It is loving to rejoice, celebrate, and to know the truth. Yeah, sorry, 13:6. It's like dyslexia or something, which I don't have. I don't even have that excuse. Okay? Sorry, 13:6. Okay, I'll read it all again now that the mumbling's over. Yeah. Love is not glad about injustice, but it does rejoice in the truth. So loving and knowing the truth. One more. Ephesians chapter 4, 11 through 15. Yes, I made sure to read that one right. We don't want that problem again. Okay, Ephesians 4, 11 through 15. And he himself, Jesus, and the work of the Holy Spirit, gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, to equip the saints for the work of ministry. That is, to build up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, a mature person, attaining to the full measure of Christ's stature. So we are no longer to be children, tossed back and forth by waves and carried about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of people who craftily carry out their deceitful schemes. So there's several offices, several people in the church whose job is to equip you to know, have the knowledge of God in Christ Jesus, and to be built up to do likewise as you have opportunity to do so. This one I'm not going to have you guys turn to. So Jesus claims he's the way, the truth, and the life. So if I'm going to say love and know the truth, well, that would also imply loving and knowing Jesus as he claims to be that. And it's fine to pursue the truth. You would expect it to lead to him if he's going to make such a bold claim, but you also have to consider him as well. I know plenty of people who want to know the truth but won't consider him. Okay? Second category, actions to engage your mind with truth. So first one is read the Bible actively, not passively. What I mean by passively is like, I'm skimming. What happened? I didn't really think about what I read. I totally get that. Like, if it's too early in the morning, I am kind of getting that glazed over look. Totally get that. I'm just thinking, engage your mind actively as you read. You know, if you're going to set aside 10, 20 minutes to have a quiet time, just, get rid of distractions, be able to devote your mind and say, I'm going to read this paragraph. I want to understand what it says, and the few minutes I'm going to take time to devote to this. Reading it actively instead of passively. That also would go with coming up with a plan to read it. If you don't have a plan to read it, there's plenty of great reading plans online or apps you can download. You can talk about that at your tables, encourage each other with how you do that. Find resources to help you read the Bible actively, right? The men's group, we read it every week. We open it up, we talk about it up here, we talk about it at the tables. There's online resources. You can get a study Bible, right, that has notes on the bottom. Those are great to help. Online commentaries, there's some out there that are even free, okay? You don't have to buy them all. I can help you with any of them. Your table leaders can help you with those, getting resources in your hands on how to read the Bible actively. Okay, this next one might seem like a bit of a stretch. Read some theology. It's not like this, okay? There are plenty of great communicators, great writers out there who write theology well for anyone and everyone to read, okay? And there's plenty out there that, whoa, dang, I got to read that paragraph again or a third time because that was dense. And the language they use is like, I gotta look up in a dictionary or something. Okay, there's all kinds of availability of good theology out there to read to challenge yourself. Review the sermons. This might be a good option for you if that's where you're at. If you're fairly familiar with the scriptures, review the sermons. Like, a sermon could take 20 to 25 hours to prepare. How many of you are shocked by that? Okay, a few. Like, when I preached a few weeks ago on one passage, I only had to do one sermon. I wasn't doing all three. I spent 25 hours preparing for that. And it's kind of a appreciation for the work of the pastor to say, hey, I'll take what you have seriously instead of, I'm not saying you guys do this, but instead of just sitting there, cool, you entertain me for 30 minutes. Okay? They spend a lot of time to feed the sheep, as we talked about a couple weeks ago in the Gospel of John. Think about what we sing, right? Think about what we sing. We choose songs intentionally. And maybe those can become songs that you want to think about throughout the week or have them in your car as you go along. A couple of good books I'll recommend if you guys want to write these down. The first one is Knowing God by J.I. Packer, like Green Bay Packers. Knowing God by J.I. Packer. Another one is Knowledge of the Holy by A.W. Tozer, Tozer. Okay. And then this one is aptly titled, Love Your God with All Your Mind. Love Your God with All Your Mind by J.P. Moreland, Moreland. I don't know what it is. They all abbreviate. You must have to get famous before you can abbreviate your name to 2 letters. But whatever. They all did that. Okay? Those are not the only books those people have written, but I've read them all. They're good stuff. They'll be challenging to some. They'll be readily available to others. Okay? Just a variety of things. And as you read these things, as you review scriptures, as you think about the songs, as you actively read the scriptures, consider what are your convictions. Continue to let them be shaped and transformed, which go with how you deal with your will, right? Okay, like if you've ever heard of Jonathan Edwards, he has a whole bunch of short sentences that are resolutions. I resolve to, drawing those things from the scriptures, and he puts a resolution out there to do a certain action based on those scriptures, and he continues to add to them over his Christian life. Last category number 3, stimulate your mind so that it's able to consider well what God has called you to do or what he has made in his creation. Okay? I want you guys to open up to Ecclesiastes. Okay, we are going to go through these kind of quickly because they tend to say fairly similar things. So the first one is in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. It's right after Psalms and Proverbs. Ecclesiastes 1:13. So this is Solomon. If you don't know Solomon, Solomon is, how do we say this? Like, amazing in his wisdom. And here is one of his later books that he writes towards the end of his life. 1:13. I decided to carefully and thoroughly examine all that has been accomplished on earth. I concluded God has given people a burdensome task that keeps them occupied. Okay? You notice the words that he uses. I carefully and thoroughly examined all that has been done on the earth. He's engaging his mind in this study. Turn to the next page, chapter 2, verse 3. I thought deeply about the effects of indulging myself with wine. All the while, my mind was guiding me with wisdom, and I wanted to consider the effects of behaving foolishly so that I might discover what is profitable for people to do on earth during the few days of their lives. Over in chapter 7, 7:25. I tried to understand, examine, and comprehend the role of wisdom in the scheme of things, and to understand the stupidity of wickedness and the insanity of folly. There's lots of thinking words here. Okay? One more in chapter 8. Chapter 8, verse 9. While applying my mind to everything that happens in this world, I have seen all this. Sometimes one person dominates other people to their harm. He does all this research, draws a conclusion. It's a thought experiment. It's a thought process. He's observing and reflecting on life. He's engaging his mind to consider all that he has, all that's before him. You can read other places. He studies all kinds of things. He engages his mind in what's before him in this created world. He reads through, studies the scriptures that he has in front of him. He writes proverbs, statements of wisdom. In engaging your mind, just a side note, right? Scientists of the past did not think that engaging their mind in their work, right, of their studies, and eventually coming up with all kinds of scientific principles and laws like Kepler, Boyle, Maxwell, Faraday, Kelvin, they didn't think that it was opposed to their faith. That their studies, their engagement of their minds with the science in front of them of their day said, here's a chance for me to get to know God more, understand how he has set up this universe that he's created. Okay? Which is a little different than some scientists today, but it's a chance to get to know God's creativity. And I thought that was very insightful from these scientists of the past. Your work, okay? Your work is not something to be disregarded. I hope you think at work. I hope you use your mind at work. Who doesn't? I'm going to tell your bosses. Oh, thank you for volunteering. I call that boss tomorrow. Make a mental note for myself. It's not a thing where you go and you don't think about what you're doing, right? You engage your mind. Be creative. Come up with solutions. Come up with, how could this run better? use the mind that God has given you so that not only so you can help the company, but that other men and women at the company might see, they go about it very well. If I saw someone at work who is not really engaged with what they're doing and putting some effort in, I would have a hesitancy about asking them what they believe or anything beyond work, right? It really detracts from the testimony. You guys can read this later, but it's in Exodus 31. Craftsmen have been denoted to create things that go into the tent of meeting and later into the temple. They are noted for their skills with wood and metalwork. And God calls on them specifically to do something for him. It's not just the priests who get all these privileges. They're called on for their skills and what they have as their availability and what their job is. Okay? As a reminder, your work came before the fall. Before the fall. Before the fall. Some people think that work is a curse. No, it's not as easy as it maybe could be. There might be some difficult people. All this jazz, we could go on and on about things we could potentially complain about. Okay? But it can be a gift. It can be, hey, I've got something that it meets my skills, meets my passions at work. Like, I can go into it. But I know there are times when it's not always possible. Last thing in this category, I would put curiosity. Pique your curiosity. Find something that you find interesting, like, oh, you know what? I want to know more about that. Explore with your mind. Here, Solomon is exploring with his mind all kinds of things in front of him for the curiosity's sake. It drives some creativity. It drives some opportunities for you to think new, think fresh, instead of getting stuck in ruts. I know I get stuck in ruts, and I just want to, gosh, I got to find something new to learn about. Okay? So I think, in conclusion, God has rightly asked us to love him with our whole selves, with our whole beings, and that does include our minds. It would seem like a disservice to check my mind out in my worship to him, in my consideration of his scriptures, in my consideration of his creation, versus I have an opportunity to engage God with my mind, think about who he is, think about whether this is true or not, how I might tell others, how I might share with others something I've come to know and not just feel. Both are happening, right? Both are happening. And God has given us plenty of things to apply our minds to. And I think you get to see them, you get to know them, and as you get to understand them, you can glorify him and benefit yourself and benefit how you think about your own life, your work, your marriage, all these kinds of things as you worship God.